Hello there, my name's Annette with Sunbeam Fabric Art. Welcome to my channel. Today we are on the very last block of the wedding dress sampler quilt. I'm basing this block on the card trick block out of Barbara Brackman's encyclopedia. I am modifying it a little bit, and because of the way I'm doing my cutting and my half square triangles, my two blocks for the quilt are going to end up just a little bit different. I'm using three different fabrics here, the wedding dress and a dark and a light fabric. So I colored in my little pattern. I'm also switching out the hourglass block in the center of the card trick block for just a solid dark fabric. And here I've got all the pieces laid out that will make one block. The first thing I'm going to do is take all of my wedding dress squares. I've got 4 that are 5-inch squares and 2 that are 6-inch squares. I'm going to draw a diagonal line from corner to opposite corner on the wrong side of all my wedding dress squares. Now it is time to make a bunch of half square triangles. So I'm going to take my 5-inch squares of wedding dress, place them right sides together with my 5-inch squares of this lighter fabric, and I'm going to stitch about 1/4 of an inch away from the line that I drew. Next, I cut these apart on the line I drew. I will press these units open. If you are using wedding dress fabric, be sure and test the settings on your iron to find the one that works for you. I like to chain piece these. I will stitch down one side of my line, then I will flip all the units around and I will stitch down the opposite side. Next, we're going to take the half square triangles that we made with our 6-inch squares. We're going to add a 5-inch dark square to this to make a 1/4 square triangle. The first thing we're going to do is draw a line diagonally corner to corner, and what I'm doing is lining up a horizontal line on my ruler with the seam so I get a nice straight line across from corner to corner. Now I'm going to put this right sides together with my dark block, and I'm going to flip this over, so I'm going to be able to center this 5-inch dark square on my larger unit that's underneath. Then, just like making a half square triangle, we're going to stitch about 1/4 of an inch away from our line, flip it around and stitch the other side. Then we'll be cutting this unit on the line we drew. We'll have our 2 1/4 square triangles. Now I just wanted you to be aware, if you are making this exactly like I am making it, your 2 1/4 square rectangles will be different. You will have one with a medium on the left side and one with a medium on the right side on the 1/4 square triangle part. I am okay with that. It's going to make 2 different blocks that are going to look similar. But if you want them all exactly the same, you've got to take that into account. Let's talk about squaring up these blocks. First, the half square triangle, that's easy to do. We're just going to lay the diagonal line on the ruler over the seam that we stitched. I'm going to trim away the right side and the top side. Then I'm going to flip the block around the opposite way and do the exact same thing. I'm going to line up this time the left and the bottom with 4.5 inches, keeping that diagonal line over the seam, and trim off the other 2 sides. Now what we know here is that our finished block, we want it to be 4.5 inches. That center point where the 3 seams come together needs to be 2 1/4 inch. So I found the dot on my ruler where that 2 1/4 inch mark is. Then I use the diagonal line on my ruler to line up on the seam. Then I was able to flip the block around and just line up on the 4.5 inch line, then trim the other 2 sides of the unit. With everything trimmed down to 4.5 inches, it's time to lay out the block. I'm using my little pencil drawing to help me lay it out because I am doing it a little bit differently than the book. For the first block, I'm using 4 1/4 square triangles that are identical, and you can see how it's laid out. Now when I get to this second block, you can see it changes the block a little bit by having that gray fabric on the other side. Now it's time to put these rows together. I like to chain piece. I take the left 2 units from each row and I just stitch them all together, chain piecing them. Then I put them back where I got them from. Then I go through and chain piece one more time, adding on that 3rd unit to each row. Now it's time to put rows together. Each row has 3 units, so there are only 2 seams I need to match. I'm using the nesting technique and clips to make sure my seams are going to line up. I go ahead and clip on row 3 as well before I stitch my seams. Well, there are a lot of ways, a lot of color combos you could use in a card trick block. These 2 blocks, as you'll see here, are quite different. There's just a different look with that gray fabric on the opposite side. But I'm okay with that. This is just part of a sampler quilt, and now I've got 2 more blocks, and these are the last 2. Thanks so much for joining me today for these 2 blocks, and I hope to see you back again real soon.